and gone through it. All of the information is available online publicly. So everything is done as an open book, fully transparently. So everyone can see that information in the public domain. And I mean, the best deal for the residents, this is the fine balance that Gabby's been talking about, in that, you know, we would like more homes, but, you know, this scheme does deliver a bigger payment. And, you know, us as officers have really gone through that balance carefully, applied moderate rates at certain points, you know, benefits in the heritage balance. So it's been a very difficult balance to strike, to be honest with you. But we are, you know, recommending to you tonight to approve it. And that's with that independent, rigorous testing that we've done by our colleagues, and obviously giving due weight to local representations as well.
Councillor Rusty.
Thank you. I'm about 2 or 4 Lansdowne. Well, obviously, Shepherd's Trust is sort of social or kind of charity, you could consider. So would that existing homes where they had 16 factored as 0 because based on whatever calculation, would that not be different for a charity, because obviously they're for a social benefit and purpose, as opposed to, you know, market trends and etc. But
do you mind if I answer that one, Gabby? Sorry. That's such a good question, because as part of that 2-year discussion about affordable housing, officers did pursue the point about is that existing social housing, you know, is that Shepherd's Trust accommodation good enough to consider as existing affordable housing, making a contribution as low cost housing in the borough? There was a lot of discussion about that, and legal advice was sought, and the conclusion was no, because it is in private ownership, so it wasn't within the control of a established RP or the council itself. So that's, it's not social housing as existing. And then also
isn't RP the registered provider as social housing with that?
Yeah, I mean, because it's the Shepherd's Trust, they are just a private owner, and therefore so it's not.
Trust is a private owner.
Yes, yeah. So it's not affordable housing or community housing as defined in planning policy. But that has, you know, fed into all the discussions we've had about where we've gone to on the you know, the payment that's come forward. Because we have given that weight as the fact it contributes to low cost housing, even if it's not truly community affordable housing as defined by the local plan. But it's a good question.
Any other questions? So, colleagues, you need to move to a decision on this application. I mean, I think it's an unusual application because of the history with the Shepherd Trust, because of the planning condition in 1984 and the amalgamations. And I guess as I've thought about it, you know, I've really wrestled with the social housing and the contribution. I really do respect Mr. Mishkon's view about the mix. I mean, you know, I think everybody can have a view on what the best possible use of these buildings is, but they do belong to Booker. So we have to consider the application that is in front of us this evening. So, well, I just welcome any views on any views.
I know it's attractive to say we have social housing within the building itself, but sometimes though it's attractive and admirable, it's not actually practical. And in this case, it proved to be impractical. And I think the 3.8 contribution will allow the council to build or to purchase fantastic packages. And I think the balance here, I see that the fairness here is being taken care of in a sense.
I have to make a comment as well. I think it was you know, a highly intelligent application and highly elegant and intelligently argued officer report. I've sat on hundreds of planning committees for many years, and I think you have to read it carefully because everyone's first instincts might not be what full amount of work that's gone into this over the years. But the officer's report puts that very well. And so I'm very comfortable with the officer's recommendation.
Okay, so I think we're ready to move to Councillor Hurberton. Have you got something
No,
else?
just I appreciate the work that has gone into it, but in the end, it is still against policy, so I will be voting.
All right, so we move to a vote now. The recommendation is to approve the planning application. Can those in favour please show? And those against? So the application is granted. Thank you very much. So we will now move to 19 Halsey Road. You're on.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin my presentation, I'd like to draw members' attention to the committee Dunham report, which includes further supporting materials submitted by the applicant. This is an application for planning permission for the part demolition of the existing extensions and excavation of single-storey basement underneath the proposed extensions and footprint of the building, along with the construction of a two-storey gardenway. The officer recommendation is to refuse planning permission for 2 reasons, which include the impact on the living conditions of the neighbouring occupiers 20 to 28 Camden Hill Gardens and overdevelopment of the site. The site is located on Hillsey Road and is a detached dwelling house in the Kensington conservation area. The property is identified as a positive contributor to the character and appearance of the area. This slide shows a photograph of the existing building when viewed from the street and the immediate surroundings. Members will note the crenellated side wing with a roof terrace, which is proposed to be demolished as part of this proposal. This slide shows some aerial views of the site, and I'd also like to draw members' attention specifically to 20 to 20A Camden Hill Gardens, which is the infill house at the rear boundary of the site. This slide shows the existing front elevation. Members will note the existing townscape gap between the side extension and 20 Hillsey Road. And this slide shows the proposed front elevation, which shows the demolition of the existing side extension along with the construction of a 2-storey garden wing and associated terrace. This slide shows the existing and proposed visuals taken from Hillsey Road up and down towards the site. And this slide shows the existing ground floor plan with 20 Camden Hill Gardens located to the north of the site and shows the extent of the existing extensions. This slide shows the proposed ground floor plan, where members will note the shift in massing from the side extension to create the garden wing, along with the extension which links the wing with the main house. Members will also note how the extension extends up to the boundary wall of 20 to 20A Camden Hill Gardens and then sets back to create the garden wing. This slide shows a proposed section drawing taken from the front elevation, which shows the basement to be excavated and the ground floor link extension connecting the main house with the garden wing. And this slide shows another proposed section drawing, which hopefully shows the visibility of the ground floor link extension from the street scene above the front boundary wall, but also shows the proximity to the neighbouring dwelling at the rear. This slide shows the existing elevation, showing the view from Camden Hill Gardens. Members will note the existing boundary wall with the associated trellising separating the site from the neighbouring property. And this slide shows the proposed elevation, which shows the development from this neighbouring property, along with the increase in height to create the ground floor corridor link extension and the associated part 3-storey garden wing. This slide has been included given that one of the reasons for refusal relates to overdevelopment of the site and the bulk of massing introduced by the additional extensions, and is quite helpful for members to see the differences in floor space. So on the left-hand side, you can see the existing floor space areas, and then on the right-hand side, you can see the proposed floor space that would be created. And I've also included this aerial image again, as it's quite helpful for members to see, given the second reason for refusal focuses on the impact to the living conditions of the property to the rear. And this slide shows some photographs taken from the site, which shows the windows of the neighbouring property, which members may also find helpful. The officer's recommendation is to refuse the application due to the impact on the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers at 2028 Camden Hill Gardens and on overall development of the site and the proposed boat bulk and mass increase by the extensions. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Wesley. So we'll now call the applicants to the table. We don't have any objectors. So please, to Guy Weston, Lady Weston, and Mr. St John, please come to the table. Arnold.
Here's a kitchen from Gerald Eads.
Oh, yes, you are on the list. I'm so sorry, I'm very blind. Four of you. Okay, well, welcome to this meeting. So as before, there'll be 3 minutes which you can use as you like, and then there may be questions from the committee. So please, whenever you are ready.
Thank you everyone for coming. This application is very important to our family. We've lived in the area for over 20 years and we've lived at Nest Cottage for over 4, and we know the house and plot very well. Our vision was to create a multi-generational home. It's very important to us to see us to the end of our days. The house needs to be accessible. At the moment, there are 7 steps up to the front of the door and many levels inside at every floor level. The garden is not integrated to the house, more steps, and is mostly a north-facing, shaded, muddy, grassy slope. We've done a lot of thinking. We've done extensive pre-application consultations with the officers, and we have refined the scheme. And we've also invited all our neighbours to come and see our plans, and we've hosted over 20 of them, and we're very pleased that many were very positive about it. We believe that the new house will be far more sympathetic structure, which will be linked to the low levels of the main house, and the majority of the increase in house area is actually at the single basement level, and therefore uncontroversial. For me, what's really important is the garden, which will be much more improved. It will face west, the level of the house, and much sunnier. I understand that a key sticking point is a sensible enclosure at 2028 Camden Hill Gardens, where the small 2-storey part of our proposed garden wing comes within 2.5 metres of the rear garden boundary. However, we believe the effects on our neighbour's garden is very modest, and we know that daylight to their garden windows will still meet adequate standards. There is no overlooking, but also, as you can see from all those photos, the removal of the large sycamore tree, which dominates all of those photos, including this one, and stands exactly south of their garden on the boundary, will actually mean that they will have far more daylight and sunlight in their garden. We also positively impact Hillesley Road, where we'll be increasing the green foliage on the road from 8.4 to 10 metres. We also have a terrace which overlooks Hillesley Road, and we're proposing that the new terrace will be much smaller than the current one. So again, it's getting very sympathetic. The second entrance at the rear at Camden Hill Gardens will also have greenery onto Camden Hill Gardens. And we have green roofs at every level. So all the houses overlooking us on all sides, and there are many on both sides of the house, will see verdant green planted roof spaces with trees, plants, and pollinators. We really care about our neighbours, and we have really considered them at every stage of the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? 30 seconds. Okay, thank you very much. Questions? Does anybody have any questions for the applicants? Councillor Oretti.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lady Weston, for your speech. Presumably, I think the extension is quite massive. If you look at over 700 square meters, would be about 3 times more than what existing. Is it to cater for your demographic changes and to cater more family living?
The numbers. I'm not sure I got the numbers to hand, but it's I don't think it's a massive extension. We're building a basement, which significantly extends the floor area, but the extension of the ground floor space is not a very substantial increase over the existing ground floor space. And the reason your question is about why the climate.
Yes.
additional space.
And I guess for that, we have between us 7 children and we've learned a lot of children. I grew up in a household where I was the youngest of 3 generations living in a household. And I really hope to die in a household where I'm the oldest of 3 generations. And, and that's very much the kind of, way we mix, we're always with our children. And it's very important for us to be with our families. And I expect, and I hope they will want to support us as we enter into our senior years.
If I could say, at the moment, the house is a big lump with living spaces on the ground floor and bedrooms upstairs. Guy and Nina are recently married and they want to be able to use the house differently with a wing which allows them to live separately from their children when they come to visit the house with their grandchildren. So it extends the house more generously so that it's more flexible in how it can be lived in.
We envisage the garden wing to be a separate wing, but we would live in our old age.
Sure, I understand. One question, if I may. I understand few comments from your neighbours, especially for the invasion of daylight and privacy into matters. Obviously, was there a daylight report done, or was it substantial enough to prove that?
There was a daylight and sunlight report, which confirms that the scheme complies with the BRE guidelines. And you'll have seen from the officer's report that there's not an objection to this on daylight and sunlight grounds. It's from the officer's perspective around the sense of the enclosure and the outlook, but not daylight and sunlight.
And look at that big tree, moving that, they'll get so much more daylight.
So there's no teeth production of it. Right, thank you. That's it.
Any other questions?
You mentioned the report, fits the requirement, but the requirement should be at the end of it or at the top of it. How far within the requirement is it? Do you know?
I wouldn't want to give you a figure off the top of my head as to which particular where that percentage lies, but it was within the guidelines.
I also have a question. You're talking about multi-generational living. Are all your kids living with you now, or is that?
We have 3 children living with us now.
Yes.
But we envisage that more could come in and live with us as well. I mean, we don't know who will. Who knows what our children will be doing in 20 years' time, but principally we should imagine that at least some
would want.
I mean, if all of them did, that might be a bit overwhelming, but we would make it happen. We make it work.
Yeah.
But at least some of them would come and live with us and and support us.
Also, you said you've spoken to a lot of your neighbors, but there is a lot of concern, it seems, from 20A regarding the development.
We've seen the letter of objection. They're not here today. I mean, and all I can reiterate is actually, we do hope, and we will know that they will get more sunlight and daylight from the structure, and especially from the removal of that tree. I mean, that aerial view shows how massive that tree is. Especially when it's in full bloom. And I really hope. We really have thought about it. We really have thought about everyone, and really have tried to think about ways. We're not, we're quite nerdy, as a couple. We want to put into place things that work for everyone. We understand that. We've been in this borough for a very long time. I want to be in that house forever. I want to be friendly with everyone.
Probably going to kill it.
This is probably a question to the officers, but about it's a very tiny street. So the development, how, and there's going to be excavation. I think that may be a question for the officers about excavations and how it's going to be taken, because it's quite hilly, and I know people are concerned about digging up and affect which part of their building. So I'll leave that for you.
Could I ask that question?
Please go ahead.
Is that all right?
Yes.
You're absolutely right. And when our clients held an evening for local residents to see the scheme, their principal concern was about the management of construction, because it's a narrow street.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, in our application, there's a construction management plan explaining how that would be done. And as I understand it, the officers have no objection to that plan. Basically, it means that construction will take place ideally behind a hoarding with very carefully controlled times when material will be taken in and out of the site, and it will involve the loss of 2 parking spaces during the period of construction, which will be approximately 18 months.
It might just be worth saying that the residents of Hillesley Road, particularly officers, were very positive about that scheme. Not least perhaps because they're intending schemes themselves, but they understand that things like this can be done and can be managed. They just want to reassure us.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, so please return to your seats. I'm sure we have some questions for officers. You'd like to start? Yeah.
Structural management, I mean, how we're gonna manage the construction, and is there any way to, this is the first time I sit on an application where there is downhill, and I can see the concern of why someone next door might be very concerned about digging at a level where it might be their ground floor, as opposed to, when it's flat, it's digging whole space. So talk me through that.
Yes, no, of course. I've pulled up this slide just because it's probably quite good at showing the extent of possibly the excavation works, particularly at the basement level, which is at the bottom of the screen. So there are a lot of there's a lot of excavation proposed, which would be underneath the main footprint of the house, where there is already sort of an existing basement level, and there's already a basement underneath the crenellated side extension. So the premise of that would be infilled as part of the works, and then excavation would go underneath the ground floor link and then underneath the garden wing to the side. So officers are taking the view when assessing it against policy CD11, the basements policy, that it does meet all of that criteria, given it's a single story in depth. It doesn't extend under parts of the garden. It's all underneath the proposed new extensions. So it meets that criteria. And in terms of the construction management, it's a very valid point because it's a very sort of narrow street and it's uphill. The council's highway officer reviewed the draft CTMP as that's a sort of requirement of the policy, and has requested a final construction traffic management plan to be submitted before the development can commence, which would include further consultation with neighbours as well. So as part of that exercise, they then go through all that additional consultation, and before they can start the works on site, our highways officer would scrutinise that final report.
Does it have to come to committee?
If members wanted it to come back, it could come back to committee, but that's the only reason why that must have.
I mean, I've seen a lot of tighter sites with much worse conditions. Hillesley Road is tricky, but it's Aubrey Walk, isn't it? It's the bigger road. I mean, there is access. So I didn't feel that
You don't know.
was something that, but over to you when you feel strongly about it. I've seen a lot worse than this.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that neighbours feel comfortable. They're being consulted, which is very nice and admirable. But also I wanted to feel that councillors and the council is looking after them also and making sure that their welfare is looked after. And this way, I'm going to jump to my next question with the daylight report. At which end is it okay? Is it okay at the very top end of the daylight or at the very just before it becomes?
Yeah, so the application was supported by a thorough daylight sunlight assessment, and through that assessment it demonstrated that 21 neighbouring windows were tested, and 18 of those 21 neighbouring rooms were demonstrated to meet or exceed BRE targets. So officers' concerns weren't really related to the daylight sunlight issues. It was more the sense of enclosure. Because I can pull up the sort of this elevation, particularly where you have the existing boundary wall and then the trellis, and then the proposed where it kind of comes up by 1.5 metres for that corridor extension and then extends up to a part 2, part 3 story garden wing. So from officers' point of view, that was considered to be quite an overbearing structure on that neighbouring property, which has that only source of outlook to the rear.
So what changed? If officers thought that was overbearing and it hasn't been approved, or is it?
No, that hasn't.
So
been
it's
approved.
sorry.
So the officers are recommending refusal
Yes.
because of
Because
this point.
Yes.
So is this the main point you recommend a refusal?
This one and the impact on the townscape and the conservation area. So overdevelopment of the site and the infilling of that gap with that corridor extension. Sort of linking the main dwelling with the garden wing.
So I have a question which kind of follows on from councillor Idris. I did come and visit today with you, and the reason I wanted to come and visit is because a lot of the site is very hidden from the streets. You can't really see what's going on. And I really do respect the opinion that about the overdevelopment and obviously the extra massing. And I think it could have a detrimental effect. However, you can't see it. So, I mean, and the harm is written down as being less than substantial harm. And I did have a look to see where the windows were of neighbouring properties. And I think there's some very long private views that would look onto it. But really, I personally didn't feel that there was a great impact from the additional massing. And you certainly wouldn't be able to see it from any public view from the street. So that was my conclusion on that point. I was actually more concerned about 20A Camden Hill Gardens, which is this small, well, I mean, I don't want to be rude to it because it's a lovely house, but it's a smaller house from the rest of the houses. And I was concerned about the impact on that. And again, very difficult to see the impact from the street, which is why I wanted to go and have a look at it. I mean, it's actually a flank wall that looks onto the house. So there's no impact from the side of the house. All of the impact is from front. And actually there is a setback in the plans where there's not going to be, I mean, the wall is set back. So, sorry, it's very hard to explain this because that's partly why I wanted to go and see it. But I also read very carefully the objection from number 28, which was quite long, but it was really all about construction. I thought tellingly they didn't mention at all about overlooking, sensible enclosure, any of these things. And I kind of thought, well, why would they write such an objection and not if it was a problem for them?
Yeah.
If they felt, but notwithstanding that, sometimes people can't really see the impact of the development. So I wanted to go and have a look at it myself. And the conclusion that I came to was that really, I mean, the tree, you know, it's a shame that the tree will have to go, but actually the impact on them, I thought would be extremely moderate. And I personally didn't feel it would be appropriate to refuse the application on the basis of them. And I have to say, I was also quite impressed with the local community engagement, which has been, of course, everybody worries about construction. Yeah. We hear that every single time we meet here at the planning committee. But really these concerns that have been raised were not raised by the neighbours, and everything is quite hidden. So personally, I felt comfortable with it.
So one final question. I know we're losing a tree in this application. Is it going to be replaced, and is it going to be replaced like for like, or what's the story there? I don't like moving trees.
Yes. And so our tree, well, the application was supported with an arboricultural impact assessment, and our tree officer has sort of scrutinised that report. And whilst it's probably a sort of an unpopular opinion that the tree would be lost, they didn't raise an objection to its removal. But if members felt that the recommendation was to change and be to approve, a condition could be added to include details.
Well, clearly the tree needs to move for a certain construction to take place. Yeah. But it could be replaced because there is a lot of grading around the house from the description.
The tree, if you so I've had a look at the report on the tree. It's very, very close to one of the walls, and actually I think it's been assessed that the tree can't stay there.
No, I know that, but what I'm saying is, can it be replaced?
It's in the report.
Sorry?
It's in the report.
It's in the replaced by, I'm sorry, maybe I missed,
So,
because I skipped.
right?
Councillor
Yeah,
Robertson.
thank you. Especially, I know you spoke about day and sunlight report. 6.28 says will meet or exceed BRE targets, but there's no definition whether it met or exceeds. And then in the end, the conclusion was the proposal would not therefore result in harmful loss of daylight and sunlight to neighbours. So technically, it's considered okay.
From
In real terms.
Yeah, from a daylight and sunlight perspective, we took the view that it would be acceptable. It was more the sense of enclosure and the development of the inclusion of sort of 2-3 story ancillary garden wing that was sort of encroaching towards that property, but we saw that as a overbearing structure. But I mean, yeah, members could take on.
But all of the windows face backwards,
That's
they
correct,
don't
yeah.
face onto the site, so it's hard to sort of see how any of the windows would be affected by the additional massing. I think the sense of enclosure comes from the building getting closer to the garden,
Yeah.
but the garden's actually quite large.
Yeah.
So, look, I completely respect the view, but I didn't feel that was an adequate reason for
It's absolutely okay. Yeah. But one final question. So if you go to the previous law, you compared and go back again. You know where you have the current one and the proposed width of the square.
Or the, did you mean that one?
Yeah, that one.
Oh, this one, sorry.
So the majority of the increase in massing, I mean, you look at 563 square meters.
Yeah.
Will be, the floor space will be predominantly the basement as opposed to the, is that correct?
It's
Yeah.
basement and ground floor
Right.
with the extensions. That's where most of the massing is.
So that's really not an objectionable to neighbours.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
They can't see it.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's my-
Any other questions? Okay, so I think we are ready to move to a decision unless anyone's got any more comments. So the recommendation is to approve, to refuse the application. Can those in favour please show? And can those against please show? Okay, we need
So you
to
need someone to
propose a reason
or propose to approve.
I'll propose to approve.
and a seconder. Absolutely.
And then, so
No reason for approving.
you'd be voting to approve, and it may be helpful to delegate conditions to officers.
Yeah.
Just listening to your conversations, it would probably be the standard conditions. Important basement conditions relating to construction, code of construction practice, and then our standard things relating to sustainable drainage,
Yes.
that kind of thing, landscaping potentially. So if you're happy for us
Yeah.
to deal with those, you could
Absolutely.
propose to that, proposing to approve, like councillor Mackers has seconded, would be with conditions delegated to us.
That's fantastic.
Okay, so
I would like to have the living conditions because that improves the living conditions as one of the conditions.
We could, I don't know if we could secure an improvement there, but we could have a look very carefully at things like stopping flat roofs being used as terraces.
Yeah.
That, you know, those are the kind of amenity considerations we can
yes.
scrutinise as part of that delegation.
Yes.
but the terrace
Yes.
is overlooking that in the plans. We know.
Yes, I don't think the intention is to use the flat roofs as terraces anyway, but it could just be that those conditions are there to
Yeah.
where there are flat roofs and things like that,
Makes
to think about amenities and those things.
Okay. All right. So the proposal is to approve the application at 19 Hillsley
With the conditions.
Road with the conditions that we talked about. Can those in favour please show? And can those against please show? So the application is granted. Thanks very much. Thank you. Right. Is everyone all right to carry on for the, anybody need a break? Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. And then,
Super fast.
all right. Mr. Wesley. Off we go again. Application at Gordon Cottages on Duke's Lane. Wesley, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the construction of a mansard roof extension, single-storey rear extension, alterations to rear elevation, installation of acoustic plant enclosure. It's worth members noting that the majority of these works have been consented previously under a previous application. Therefore, the changes to this scheme include the replacement of the existing front and rear windows with double glazing and carry out alterations to the front garden. The proposals also seek to reconstruct the rear garden walls and associated trellising with an increase in height of 2 meters. The site is situated on the corner of Pitt Street and Duke's Lane and is a 2-storey dwelling within the Kensington Conservation Area. This slide shows an aerial image of the site and photographs taken of the property, which shows the variation in the terrace group of rear additions and roof extensions. This slide shows some site photographs taken showing the demolition of the existing conservatory and the existing views towards the rear terrace behind the application site. This slide shows a proposed site plan which details the previously approved work such as the mansard roof, rear extension and associated plant, with the items denoted in red being the new proposals in this application. This includes a new boundary garden wall in the rear garden, reconstruction of the front boundary wall and new railings and pavings in the front garden. This slide shows the previously approved rear elevation, which includes the rear extension and mansard roof. And this slide shows the existing and proposed rear elevations, which includes the previously approved works, along with the new replacement double glazed windows at the rear elevation. This slide shows the proposed front and side elevations, which show the replacement windows at the front, along with the reconstruction of the new garden wall, which would be increased in height. This slide shows the existing and proposed boundary wall elevations in the rear garden. Members will note the existing situation detailed on the left-hand side of the slide and the proposed replacement boundary wall detailed on the right. The officer recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to the conditions contained in the officer's report. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so we do have an objector and the applicant speaking. So could I please ask the objector, Mr. Natchez, sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm not doing very well on names this evening. Thank you for bearing with us, and we've got 3 minutes, please. Of course.
Thank you. My name is Alistair Matchett, and I live at 27 Gordon Place, representing myself and the occupants 25 Gordon Place, 29 Gordon Place, and 30 Holland Street, who all border the applicant's property. We object to this proposal for 3 key reasons. First, a significant increase in the sense of enclosure, particularly for properties Gordon Place, whose ground level is slightly sunken to the garden. The applicant describes the proposed wall as an insignificant rise in height. The proposed changes to the walls are significant. In both 2 cases, they're doubling the height of the brick wall. Furthermore, the measurements in the applicant's drawings are both incorrect and unclear. The plans reference 27 Gordon Cottages, and there's no such address of that name. It's unclear which wall drawing relates to which property. Second, the difficulty in maintaining green screening at a new higher wall height. The higher wall will make maintaining planting much more difficult due to rain and light shadow. Currently, the privacy is achieved through dense climbing plants growing through the trellises, which provide adequate light with minimal space usage. The vibrant greenery is central to the aesthetic and ecological health of this conservation area. Third, damage to the heritage character. This development fundamentally changes the historical coherence of Gordon Place, Holland Street, and Gordon Cottages terraces, which were built together by Thomas Casey around 1850. The conservation officer, who, despite repeated requests, has told me they had not even visited the site, but they were sympathetic to our view. All the existing walls to 25, 27, 29 Gordon Place and 30 Holland Street that border Gordon Cottages are the same level at the top, providing an aesthetically consistent boundary wall between the neighbouring properties. The current low walls with stepped trellises are key design features, harmonising the different ground levels and preserving a sense of an open inverted square while allowing for effective privacy screening. I recommend the committee review photographs in my latest objection letter. Far from tidying up the boundary treatments, as the applicant suggests, the increased wall height disrupts this homogeneous design and replaces it with a visually heavy and historically incongruent structure. In conclusion, this proposal violates CD9 by diminishing the living conditions of Gordon Place residents through the overshadowing and enclosure, contradicts GB14 as it undermines the borough's green infrastructure by preventing planting and damaging biodiversity, breaches policies CD3 and CD4 by destroying the historical and architectural coherence of a key conservation area. I urge the committee to reject this application and recommend alternatives such as enhancing the existing trellising or using evergreen planting, which could address privacy concerns without compromising the unique character and heritage of the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now can I please call the applicant to table, Mr. Harrington. Please, when you're ready, if you could introduce yourself to the committee.
Good evening, I'm Martin Harradine, I'm a Chartered Town Planner. I'm not the applicant, but I'm representing the applicant. I was the agent for previous applications that Gabby dealt with on this property. I'm actually not the agent for this application, but the owner and the architect asked me to speak on behalf of the applicant to you tonight. The officer report addresses all the matters comprehensively in relation to the proposals, and I only wish to make a few additional points to the committee. Firstly, as introduced, it's important to reiterate that the main new elements of this application are simply to install double glazed windows in the house and to establish good quality boundary conditions to the site. Both of these elements could be undertaken making use of permitted development rights available, but as it's to be carried out in conjunction with the ongoing works at the site, as you know, you can't mix and match planning permission and you need to comply with your permission. So all the applicant wishes to do is have a comprehensive wrap-up permission for all the works they wish to do and do them all in one go. It would be a shame if the applicant was to complete the development as approved and then go on to carry out boundary walls as he's entitled to do under permitted development rights. That's a separate exercise because that would just take 4 or 6 months longer construction period unnecessarily. So the ambition is to wrap all of this up within one approval and have a clear approval so everything is clear. We like clarity. As confirmed in the officer report, the proposed boundary treatments are entirely appropriate to the character of the area, will provide a harmonious and high quality appearance. All the queries regarding heights of existing boundaries and accuracy of the drawings have been fully addressed to the satisfaction of officers. There were 1 or 2 small errors. There was 1 or 2 errors in terms of referencing addresses, which have been corrected. The recommendation is to grant permission subject to conditions, and you'll see that 3 of the recommended conditions are pre-commencement conditions relating to a site construction management plan, a construction traffic management plan, and a flood risk assessment. Now, in the time that this current application has taken to be determined, those equivalent conditions on the previous consent, which has currently been implemented, have all been discharged and approved. So what the applicant's been asked to do is to effectively resubmit all of that information again, pay the fee, and have the officers review it all, which seems rather unnecessary. And so my request to you is that you consider revising those conditions and rewording them to be compliance conditions with the details that you've already approved under the 3 discharge of conditions applications. Perfectly common thing to do. The information's been with the council and approved, and it relates to flood risk assessment, site construction management plan, all things that do not change as a result of the current application. So I'm asking you if you please review those conditions and make them more reasonable and workable for everyone. That's all I have to say. I'm here to, I know you want to go to move on. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Okay, colleagues, any questions for?
I'm not sure if you know about measurements. Do you happen to know the current measurements of the wall they want to change? And what's the future measurements going to be?
They vary around the perimeters of the site. I've got a drawing in front of me with dimensions on, which is equivalent to that drawing you have there, but with dimensions on. There's one key error on that drawing actually, which is on the centre left, which is the east elevation facing the boundary of 8 Dukes Lane, which is only the brick wall is shown on there. As you can see, there's a brick wall, and there's actually a fence above that, which rises to 1.8 metres. So there's actually there's something missing on that drawing there. But in answer to your question, the existing the objector for number 27, their boundary is the one on the top in the middle, I believe, and where you'll see the boundary wall, which is currently at 1.8 metres with the trellis above it. And the trellis, there's three, you can see the 3 steps. Well, 2 are trellis and one's a panelled fence. The final one's a panelled fence. And it's essentially 500 centimetres, so half a metre. The left one, the centre one is 865, and the final panelled fence is 1.27 metres above the wall. And as you can see, the ground drops there at Gordon Cottages, so the wall actually is at its highest point there. But the wall is generally about 2 metres along there. But obviously, it increases as the ground drops.
So the overall increase is how much?
Well, you can see on the left is the existing, and the height of the proposed wall is taken from the height of the proposed of the existing wall and terrace on the left. So the lowest maximum height, i.e. the height of the low terrace on the left, is struck across. So the centre, the centre step is actually becomes lower on the right, and the final step becomes significantly lower. So we reject what the objector is saying regarding an increase in overlooking, and because quite frankly, it's a mess, and it's not maintained, and there's all sorts of overgrowth and failing panels and terrace hanging over the wall.
So the finished article, say after you finish everything, how would it compare to the rest of the houses?
The surrounding area, there's a wide range of obviously the objectors have picked on a few areas where there's relatively lower brick walls with fence panels and trellising above, but you only need to go next door onto Dukes Lane at the rear to see 2.5 metre high walls, which you can find throughout the conservation area as well, as noted in the officer report.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Very much. Any other questions for the applicants and gentlemen? No? No further questions, so please do.
Thank you.
And now we'll move on to the questions for the officers, councillor Idris.
It was mentioned that the conservation officers don't visit. Why is that?
So as part of part of the officer's report, it says that officers visited the site on the 15th of August. So from the officer's report, it says that an officer did visit the site. A conservation officer may not have necessarily been required in this instance because it's not a grade 2 listed building. So we would not have necessarily consulted our internal conservation team on this particular type of application.
Okay.
But judging from the officer's report, it said that officers visited the site on the 15th of August, so a site visit has been undertaken.
Do you happen to have figures of the heights of the wall and
Yes,
so
I do have a drawing which was submitted with the application. It's not on the slideshow, but it should be in members' packs to see. But it's detailed section showing the varied heights of the wall, showing that it would go up to a maximum height of approximately 2.2 meters.
2.2.
Yes, so the range in heights of the wall are from between approximately 2 meters in one area up to about 2.2.
So that's 2.2 from what? From 1 point something or from 2 point something?
Answer for you now.
I think it might just be important to note to members that permitted development rights do exist for residential properties, and permitted development rights would allow the creation of a wall of up to 2 meters where it's not adjacent to a public highway. So where the wall is effectively relevant from a material consideration for members is that additional 0.2 meters of height from some positions within the site. So while there is an existing wall, and that is obviously clearly lower than is currently shown on site, the proposal is being put forward in order to tie the scheme together. The applicant would be within their rights to erect a wall of 2 meters from height from the ground level, and that would be taken from the rear elevation of the property. So really members are probably considering that additional 0.2 increase in height, which is only present on certain parts of the site, because you'd have to acknowledge that the applicant would be entitled, after they've completed works previously approved, to provide a wall of 2 meters.
But 2 meters is not 2.2.
No, absolutely. So members could consider that additional 0.2 meters in height where it exists, but there would have to be material reasons why that was harmful to the to neighbouring community, which I think would be limited from that perspective.
Oh, thank you.
And the portion, just immediately about it, that's another brick in the wall.
Difficult to say.
Yeah, technically.
Sometimes a brick is a brick is a brick. So just so that everybody's very clear about this, and it does say this in the report, but there are several permissions already have in place for this development. So it looks like the mansard and the, but actually all that this is really adding to what's already been approved is the windows.
The windows, the paving in the front area of the garden, and the reconstruction of the rear garden's boundary walls.
Which nobody seems to be objecting.
And the windows require planning permission?
Single to double glazing, most likely not on a residential dwelling house flats.
And the paving requires
No.
planning permission? And the boundary wall doesn't to 2 meters, so really we're considering
A brick, next to a brick.
20 centimeters, and you know, look, these things are all important to neighbours, but I did kind of observe that these houses are quite far from this boundary, well, relatively far from this boundary wall. They're not right
It's not right
up
there.
close. Any other questions or comments?
So the question, the applicant's agent asked whether conditions which had been previously discharged could be carried over. I haven't thought about the question for and what the process would be, but I just wanted to know what, in response to that, what of the approaches to that request.
I think it would be tricky in this particular case if the CTMP and the FRA weren't submitted as part of this submission.
Yeah.
So obviously I really appreciate where the applicants are coming from, but it might be quite tricky as this wasn't submitted with the proposal, so we had to recondition it.
Understood.
Because they're not linked. So if it was like a section 73, a variation permission, it's easier to make that a material consideration. They're kind of they've deliberately done it as a separate permission to encapsulate it. So it is a kind of frustrating admin exercise, but
Yeah, but technically, if there's no mechanism for carrying it.
yeah, I think it would just be a bit ambiguous, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
But isn't it just a case of resubmitting the documents?
Yes, and if they've already been approved previously, which quick search and they have been, it shouldn't, it's just more of an admin exercise on that.
Has to tie everything together.
Yeah, to re-invite for everything collectively.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? So I think therefore we move to a decision, and I think really where I am with it is that many of these items have already been approved, and really there's very little in front of us here. So the recommendation from the planning officers is to approve the application at Golden Cottages. Can those in favour please show? The application is approved. Thank you very much. Miss Westley. Is it you? No. Cancelled out, isn't it? On the agenda. 2 minutes break requested here, so we'll take a 2 minute break. Thank you very much. Thanks very much.
To get this.
It's very good. I lost the time. I use yes, to you, but you've got a little. I don't know. I'm not. Hopefully, they pick that up on the live stream.
Be the best.
Yes, we should do that.
Probably not.
We meet there was a reason why you were here to council.
Age perspective.
Yes, I think we're doing that. You can find
Obviously, I thought we were going to be.
Yeah. And hopefully I'll challenge us. I quite like it in this room.
So what it is,
Yeah. And then
you know, we want to
us on this side.
it's about caring.
So this is the last one. Yeah, I prefer
This is what this is.
it's not so
And yeah,
we've got backs to them. I just always feel bad.
we do, but it's just we've got this to explain.
But that's what before the live stream.
But during the table was
Tables turn.
Another one.
Oh, yeah, because it's usually.
Yeah.
Members now. Years ago when very first moved up here, and it was Campion. Councillor Warwick's, holiday, we had, and it was always this.
on the other side, it really felt like it's maybe presenting a new so nervous because we're just chatting. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that is.
Not quite.
Yeah.
I mean, next week.
So the committee is back, so let's restart. Now I'm confused. No speakers, please present.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. The application before members this evening is a listed building consent to replace the internal doors at Kensal House. The application is before members as the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea is the applicant. Kensal House is a Grade 2 star listed building located to the north of the borough, which primarily contains residential flats. Kensal House is significant as a building constructed in 1937 by renowned modernist architect Maxwell Fry to provide modern housing for working class families. The proposed development seeks to replace all the flat doors to meet modern fire safety standards. The doors currently in place are non-original, and so there would be no loss of historic fabric to the main door sets. The replacement doors would mirror the existing and would have a simple design commensurate with the overall architectural intent of the building as it was first designed. The recommendation is to grant this the building consent as set out in the committee papers. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much. Committee, are there any questions for officers? No. We're probably in favour of fit for purpose 5. Also, the recommendation is to approve the planning application at Kensal House. Those in favour, please show. Very much. So that one is approved.
Just to confirm it's a listed building consent, but that's absolutely fine.
So we need to do that.
No, it's very clear. But just,
sorry, it's the rest of the body, it's not the planning.
Absolutely.
Yes. So it's me.
No,
Okay, so now we'll move on to 17 Eldon Road. And this is Miss Gore again, so please go ahead and present the application.
Thank you, Chair. The application before members pertains to the installation of 3 air conditioning units and associated enclosures to the rear garden of 17 Eldon Road. The units would be enclosed by acoustic enclosures with a looped design. 17 Eldon Place is located in the De Vere Conservation Area and is a semi-detached building and has an associated rear garden. The building is residential in use. Please see here an aerial photograph of 17 Eldon Road and the associated rear garden space, the rear of the buildings along the northern side of 17 Eldon, along the northern side of Eldon Road. This is a photograph of the rear garden where the air conditioning units would be located. The units would be positioned adjacent to the boundary and would be put on mounted rafts to ensure no impact to tree roots. You can see here the existing site plan, which shows the rear garden extending to the north there. And this is the proposed. So members will see on the left-hand side the location of the 3 air conditioning units and their associated enclosures positioned towards the rear of the garden. The enclosures would have limited visibility due to their position at ground floor and the associated enclosure of the buildings that front the street scene. Due to the siting and height, there is not considered to be a harmful impact to the character and appearance of the conservation area. An acoustic assessment was submitted with the application, which found that the air conditioning units would be able to conform the council's relevant North SPD, and conditions have been proposed in order to secure the operation of those units within those noise limitations. The recommendation is therefore to approve. I would draw members' attention to the addendum report, and thank you very much. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much. So we do have three speakers, but one objector. So Mr. Martin, can you please come to the table? Speak with the committee, and thank you for waiting. I know it's been a long.
That's interesting.
Oh,
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Glad you enjoy it. Okay, so whenever you're ready, 3
Right.
minutes.
I act for most of the immediate neighbours at 17 Elgin Road. And considerable concern has been raised about the intrusive impact these air conditioning units will have on their quality of life and the potential for a canyoning build-up of sound, especially as the air conditioning units are slightly deep into the rear gardens. The planning officer's report suggests certain mitigation to satisfy these concerns. For example, condition 3 states that all sound emissions shall be 10 dBA below the existing measured lowest background noise level. However, condition 3 does not state what that lowest level actually is, even though the applicant submitted measurements calculated to be 30 dBA. Therefore, we respectfully request that this level is included within condition 3 so that complete clarity for future assessments can be clearly determined. There is enormous concern here about the future enforceability should there be down the line breaches. Condition 3 goes on to say that if these levels are not complied with, then the equipment must be switched off. So please, can we have precise levels to be included so that the wording is unambiguous? The ability for this equipment to be attenuated is entirely determined by the efficacy of the acoustic structures, which are a fundamental part of the application. The previous application, almost identical to this, was withdrawn in the summer, precisely because the attenuation levels required by the air conditioning units could not be delivered by the proposals. It seems strange now that 6 months down the line, that those precise specifications and particulars of these acoustic structures now proposed is not known. We respectfully request that your committee defers determination of the application until these details are known and properly evaluated. The current condition 6 within the officer's report does not deliver this. We respectfully request that these details are published and can be scrutinised by third-party industry specialists prior to that determination. There is widespread concern that all the material factors relating to the application be known in the public domain and evaluated prior to any grant of consent, so as to avoid uncertainty, uncertain and unnecessary ambiguity later, and so that all the concerns of the neighbours can be informed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Bottomley and Mr. Reid to come to the table, please. Welcome and thank you for waiting. Whenever you're ready, please.
Thank you. Number 17 is a tall 5-storey house with a mansard roof, which has large, expansive south-facing windows. The house experiences overheating during the hottest summer days, especially in these front elevation rooms in the roof area, and is overly cold in winter. The key points to consider: the units proposed will provide both heating and cooling via internal air coil fan units within the habitable rooms, such as bedrooms and living space. The condensers are modern Daikin units, which are more energy efficient and environmentally friendly than older units. In terms of visual impact, as officers have stated, the units being sited away from the dwelling in the corner of the rear garden, in an area enclosed by an existing brick outbuilding and a rear boundary wall. This part of the garden is well screened by trees and shrubs, and further planting is proposed. Cabinet location would have limited visual impact. There are no public views and there's only limited private views of the area. Officers consider the proposals to be acceptable. The applicant is keen to ensure the amenities of neighbours are protected. A noise impact assessment was submitted with the application. Our EHO officer scrutinised the report, confirms the units will meet the council's noise criteria and in compliance with the council's noise SPD. The officers confirm the proposed units will not result in undue noise and disturbance to favouring properties. To further ensure compliance, the compliance condition seeks to protect amenities and sets a noise that is below a certain background level. That background level could change in the future, and that is why we don't set which I understand they do not set the actual level now, because if it gets quieter, then obviously that level will need to be reduced. So in conclusion, we present this application, which is supported by officers. We've got the support of the EHO. We consider it won't impact on amenities of residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the, yes, Councillor Idris?
I'm just to the last point, you said the level might change.
Yeah.
And that's why you haven't set any.
Yes. So the noise assessment was taken. Well, obviously, Dan can probably talk about noise assessments a lot more than me.
So I'm Daniel, Director of ES Acoustics, who prepared the noise assessment. So one of the issues with background noise levels is that they can change, but also in this case, the background noise levels are very low. So often it can be actually quite tricky when background noise levels are so low to measure a sound level. Because if you imagine you want to measure, let's say, me talking, but there's a busy road in the background, you can't differentiate between those two sounds. So it just creates technical problems with the actual measurement of sound when levels are very low.
But what about people who want to know, have a figure so they can have a comfort that it is not going to go beyond a certain stage? What do you do to mitigate that?
Well, that's exactly what the condition is for. So by setting an amount below the background sound level as the target, then and usually that wouldn't necessarily be commissioned and measured afterwards. It's effectively a design process, let's say. So that will allow us to specify the requirements of the acoustic enclosure to ensure that that's providing sufficient mitigation.
If you read the condition further, if the noise exceeds that background level, then it actually states that the unit should be switched off. Yeah. So it takes account of the different levels of noise. So hopefully that should provide comfort to the neighbours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
So
yes,
just on the proximity to Mr. Martin's property or the neighbouring properties, how close is that to the neighbouring property? Obviously, the acoustics are positioned just back in the rear garden. So obviously based on what the acoustic officer.
So the red dot is the application site, and Mr. Martin's, I understand, is the adjacent property.
17A, yes.
Yeah. Instead, the 17B has what I understand air conditioning units actually on its roof.
Do you know roughly the measurement? Like,
we can have. I can't work it out because I haven't got a plan, but I'll have a go.
When they calculated the lowest background noise, they calculated it at a distance, and that's within their data. I'd like to just mention that the extraordinary thing about those set of gardens is that they are quiet and they're enclosed, and the buildings are tall, and the ability for noise to penetrate that area, street noise, other noise, extraneous noise, is very limited. And the concern that baseline is fluctuating or can fluctuate worries the residents that quietness that currently exists could, by definition, with more air conditioning units, for instance, area decreasing. That's why we've requested that our minimum level is imposed as part of the condition.
If the minimum level is actually below the noise level and or above, do you see what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to say is they are suggesting or they are planning to have the minimum possible level to be their what they measure against, and this way, so you can have maybe comfort in.
But we're dealing with the data that's available at the time of the application, and therefore the noise that these units may or may not create is backed against the clearance criteria. What the criteria may be in the future is difficult to determine. But clearly, if the noise in that area increases, then so those units may fall foul of that benchmark, I understand.
But if it decreases,
If
then
it decreases,
they will have a very, very low bar to achieve.
well, 30 is the level it can't go lower than that. That's the level they put into their report. And the borough's requirement is 10 less than 30.
If I could just add, just in terms of background sound levels, without going too technical into it, there's a British standard BS 4142 and for the assessment of commercial and industrial sound. And that standard basically points out that it's not just all about how quiet something is compared to something else that matters. There's many other factors, such as the absolute level itself. You know, like you could get to a point where you're trying to reduce the sound level to be 10 decibels below something, which is physically impossible. And, you know, because 0 decibels doesn't exist, it's the threshold of human hearing. So, you know, there will always be sound in an environment, even if we're all silent now. This room will appear silent, but it'll probably be around 20 decibels or so, 25 decibels even in here. So it just creates technical problems by setting fixed noise limits. But what I would say is that, you know, the actual condition is sufficient to protect neighbours throughout the borough, and that's something that's regularly applied. And obviously, if the units are installed and that isn't met, then the units will be switched off. So, you know, I think there's a sufficient protection there.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. I think you guys can turn to your seats, and I'm sure we've had questions for officers, Councillor Idris.
My question is when there is, the withdrawn application is very similar to the current one. So what's the difference? What changed between, I don't know, June, the one that was withdrawn in June to this one? Because they seem to me very different, but I'm not a professional, so I might be missing something.
I mean, I was involved in the previous application, but in terms of acoustic reports, the reason that we asked for an acoustic report is to justify the imposition of the condition itself to mitigate noise impact. So there may have been some, I mean, I'm speculating, there may have been some technical errors within the acoustic report which made our environmental officer question it, and we don't accept amendments. So they would have need to have gone back through a resubmission process.
Yeah.
But as members will know, whenever we apply any condition, it has to meet 6 tests to be applied to an application. And so we have to demonstrate that in applying our standard mitigation noise condition, that the applicant will be able to meet that condition. So the acoustic report is there to justify placing the condition on the application in the first instance. And the condition is there to secure the fact that the air conditioning unit should not be audible. So if one of the neighbours could hear the air conditioning unit, the justification of the condition is sufficient that our enforcement officers could go out, ask for it to be switched off, maintenance repairs, etc., made to that unit to ensure that it is not audible. So it's complicated in that the acoustic report is really there to make sure that we can justifiably impose a mitigation condition, which is fairly restrictive, and would ensure that the air conditioning units don't create a noise environment that would be uncomfortable for neighbours. So complicated, but effectively that's why we apply a standard condition, and the reports are really there just to say we can justifiably impose such a mitigation condition.
Thank you.
And I have a question about these varying noise levels and the acoustic report. So when the acoustic report is provided with the application for the reasons that you've just explained, it just measures the background sound, is it? Because obviously the units aren't there, there's nothing to measure.
It's measuring the background sound so that we can be assured that any unit could sit lower than that background sound. I mean, I would note to members that most manufacturing of air conditioning these days are designed to really run at a very low noise level. So it'd be unlikely that an air conditioning unit would sit above a background noise, particularly in an urban environment, whether that be quiet or not. traffic and airplanes and all sorts of things. But yes, effectively, it's designed to ensure that we've got a level that we are confident that the air conditioning units could run below. So if it goes above that background noise, then it would.
And this issue around if the background noise varies or goes down or goes up, I mean, how would we know if such a thing happened?
Well, I mean, if the applicant if one of the neighbours could hear the unit, then our environmental health officers would go out and take measurements to see if it's audible. But I mean, it's unlikely that a background noise in this environment would go down.
But I think what the objector was saying was that there isn't a sort of set level for the background noise.
That's because obviously background noises can vary. So this gives our environmental health officers and our enforcement officers the ability to be assured that the air conditioning units would not be audible. Because obviously if we set specific limits, like sort of Councillor Idris was indicating, if background noise levels were to to get this right in my head, if background level noises were to drop, we set it at 30 specifically, then technically they could run it potentially above the background noise, which would potentially be audible and therefore harmful to residential amenity. So the flexibility is to ensure that if we need to enforce, our environmental health officers could measure the background noise and could measure the fact that the air conditioning units are not audible, and that's the key purpose, is that if they are audible.
So it's actually the benefit of the local residents to have these variable levels.
I see where the residents' concerns are coming from, but ultimately, yes, it allows our environmental health officers to go out onto site and make sure that those units aren't at a level which is perceptible to neighbours and harmful to their environment. So from our perspective, it's easier to enforce where it's flexible and make sure that the units are audible. If we're setting specific limits, then it's a precise condition and we have to stick by that. So if for whatever reason background levels were to drop, then they could technically have it at a higher position than that background level noise. So the condition is more generically written in order to ensure we can make sure that the noise that's emitted is acceptable in accordance with our noise SPD limitations, which we feel are acceptable for a residential environment, and also to ensure effectively that they're not audible. I mean, if it's audible, we would expect it to be shut off.
What we want to achieve is if Mr. Martin calls an enforcement officer and says, I can hear this awful noise next door, or even I can hear a tiny noise coming from that aircon, that we can come to his property, stand in that room, we can hear it too. And if we can hear it, it's not in compliance with that condition. Whereas if the background noise level change, that's when there's a degree of, we have to then check the background noise level. If we can hear it based on this one, it doesn't meet the condition.
Yeah, I mean, residents are often very concerned about these air conditioning units, and we get lots of. Well, they're complaining before the units go in. Raise their concerns with us, and I guess that's probably your experience as well. But just in terms of modern units, I mean, how often would you say enforcement action is taken against air conditioning? I know you don't work in enforcement, but just what's your feeling about that? Given
I think
how much concern there is.
Historically, there has been considerable levels of concern, and I think that has begun to drop with modernisation to the units. So I work in enforcement, and I couldn't give you a statistic, but very low amount. And I would imagine complaints that are received because there's a fault with that product, and therefore it needs to undergo maintenance. But again, I don't work in enforcement, but I don't perceive that we get very many complaints, and the condition is there that if somebody does complain, we can enforce it, and therefore it would need to be switched off until such time as it could recomply with that condition.
Enforcement does fall under my remit, and the most difficult ones we have are the ones that don't have conditions on them. So it's ones that, old equipment that has been poorly serviced, we don't have these conditions on. So planning is difficult to actually get involved. It's always then left to environmental health, where there's a higher test for harm and in terms of noise. That's why environmental health love these planning conditions as well, because there's another avenue of enforcement for us.
So in your experience, a new modern units, 3 units like this, should not cause an impact on residents, given our conditions and given the modernity of the units.
Yeah, and we also get challenged and say, why do we need a noise report if you're going to put this condition on? And the reason we need the noise report is to prove that this condition will work when we go to enforce it.
Good, okay, well, thank you, that's very helpful and useful. Any other questions? So I think we can move to a decision. So the recommendation from officers is to approve the planning application, 17 Eldon Road. Can those in favour please show? Thank you, so that is approved. Next item on the agenda, flat C45 Eldon Crescent. Miss Moore, is that you?
It is, yes, thank you.
Please go ahead, Anna.
The proposed development at flat C45 Eldon Crescent includes the construction of a balcony, a rear French door, replacement of sash window with French doors, and the provision of a new flat roof with a slight extension by 250mm parapet and alterations to the storeroom. The application site is located in the land conservation area and is a mid-terrace building, as you can see on this plan in front of you. You can also see the approximate location of the proposed balcony. This is a rear aerial shot of the terrace that the application site forms a part of. Members will note the variations for fenestration details contained along that rear elevation. These are photos of the application site and of the rear context of the elevations of the terraces. Members will see the window. I can show you my cursor. This is the window here that would be subject to replacement with French doors and for which the balcony would be accessible from. And members can see the rear outrigger where the new flat roof would be positioned with the slightly increased height in terms of its effects. So these are the existing and proposed plans. So members will note the section below, which shows the extent of the balcony as it projects from the side elevation of the building. And they'll also note that increase in the parapet height there, which is conditioned for materials to make sure that it's appropriate brickwork. The application has previously been approved as a result of an appeal that was allowed back in 2017 and under delegated approval in 2021. That permission expired in September this year, so this is a re-application. I would also like to draw members' attention, paragraph 6.2 of the committee report. Comments pertaining to fire safety were received by the department, stipulating the development would not require a planning fire safety strategy as the building fell below the relevant requirements and the nature of the proposed works wouldn't require PFFS as per policy CD16. Officers were in agreement with that particular assessment. The recommendation is to approve and the report is set out in the committee papers. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a couple of speakers for this case. Ms. Denegri, if you would please come to the table, and thank you for waiting and bearing with us. And please, whenever you are ready, please do introduce yourself, and you've got 3 minutes.
Excellent. I'm Giorgia Denegri. I live next door at the garden flat or semi-basement next to this development. Small project, but the significance is that it sets precedents for that site and it affects the architectural style of that side of the garden. Unfortunately, we were not aware about the 2016 and the 2021 application. This is the first time we saw it. Of course, no objection to the neighbors changing the window. There would be no objection if the balcony was a Juliet balcony like all the rest. I believe that the council was absolutely correct to refuse in 2016. I looked into all the background papers, even the appeal inspector, I don't think she visited the site from her wording. And she recognizes, she says that she has not considered impact for us on the site. what is happening in this garden? Gorgeous garden, lovely houses. The side of Elgin Crescent is stucco, white. Ground floor, quite high ceilings. First floor, even more grandeur. The opposite side of Arundel Gardens is more developed. It doesn't have this kind of fenestration. It doesn't have high ceilings high. It has several ground floor extensions. In one of them, there is a little terrace sitting as a balcony. They blend into the background. Now, on our side, the Elgin Crescent and the white, what this balcony does, and we leave living conditions aside, is set precedent into the bulk. Next door, above where I live, that little Juliet balcony has fallen. So what will be this balcony like the rest, as it was the original architecture, or are we gonna start building these bigger and more ugly balconies? What I am saying is that if there will be redevelopment on the side of Elgin Crescent, many people will need to build big balconies, do extensions. Maybe it needs to be thought through. Coming now to the living conditions and not being petty, our sunset is at the top of this wing. So the 25 centimeters, I don't know how to calculate the impact of having sunset a little bit less or the impact on the garden. Interestingly, in the application, there is no parapet showing, and this is covered. The flat is empty right now for some time. It's covered with something, so I don't even know if there is a parapet there. Appeal was done also with an argument that this balcony would offer a fire exit, which would be what? Jump from the first floor or climb up when there is a door on the other side. I don't understand it. I tried to get hold of the neighbor. I did not manage.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholl. Thank you very much. Thank you. Do we have questions? Oh, sorry, no. Sorry, applicants. Sorry, I'm losing track. Yes, please. Can I invite Mr. Coke to come and address the committee? I'm so sorry. Losing track now. Please register to speak where. When you're ready, please do introduce yourself to the committee. Take some water. Yes, thank you for waiting. And got 3 minutes.
My name is Toby Coke. I'm the planning agent. I'm a chartered town planner and a building surveyor. The proposal was first granted the Planning Commission in 2017, and permission was renewed by the council in 2021. My client's plans to implement the proposal have been delayed by the freeholder of the building not granting a licence for alterations in a timely manner. Party wall surveyors and structural engineers for both parties have reached agreement on the structural design, which has also been signed off by the council's building control team. The design of the balcony proposal started with pre-application discussions with the council's planning officers in 2016, and amendments were made to the plans during the initial application to make the balcony more closely resemble existing balconies. The proposed French door and side panels will be of traditional timber construction, and the balcony will be painted black. The objector raises concerns regarding the style of the balcony compared to others on the rear walls. The style is similar to, though smaller than the existing balcony on the closet wing, and smaller than the first floor balcony at number 47. There is also some variety in the style of balconies and penetration to the rear elevations, and the proposed design is strongly influenced by these existing balconies. Impacts on the amenity of those in the closest flats has been assessed and is in line with the council's guidance and BRE guidance. The BRE assessment concludes that the rear room in the flat directly below the proposed balcony will remain strongly daylit. The proposal is compliant with planning policy and will not harm the living conditions of neighbours. I would therefore request that councillors grant planning permission for the proposal today. Thank you.
Thanks. Questions? Speakers?
Yeah.
Councillor Idris.
What's the measure? What's the area? The square area of the balcony?
It's around 2 square metres, about 2 metres wide, which is just a fraction wider than the existing window.
Yeah.
About 1.2 metres deep.
And what I'm looking at this photo here, and is there any relation to this?
There's a storage room in that one, yes.
So is the balcony going to be underneath this window, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. And there is no, and is it touching this construction in the little window, or is it?
There's an existing window in the side of the closet wing, so that could be used as a fire escape.
Can you explain to me how? I mean,
do you see the window in the side?
Yes, yes.
It's a very small window.
But you said the balcony is 2 meters. What's the measurement of this? The measurement of this wall? What is it? It's more than 2 meters. Yeah.
I'm not sure why that is relevant, because it's not going to be the length of the closet wing. It's only sticking out 1.2 meters from the main building.
But it's not going to be at level with this building. So because if you have to move out of this balcony here to use this building as a fire exit, it has to be at level, and it is not at level.
Yeah.
I'm missing something.
It is at the same level as the existing side window.
Oh, there's a window here. Look,
There's a very small side
it's
window.
tiny.
Yeah.
It's where you can't see it. Right there.
It's not. Yeah. It's
That's
something
right.
the client asked for.
It's this little window here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure somebody could. Well, I couldn't get in that, but
It was
maybe
just
some
on
people can.
client. She lost a friend to a fire, so she's quite sensitive about
gosh.
the issue.
But there's a door on the other side of this wing. There's a door. This wing.
Correct.
You're talking, right, this is the first.
That's from the communal stair, yeah.
Okay. No, it's not communal, it belongs to this.
No, if you go through the top
Oh,
door.
so
That was the idea.
Okay, I think we'll ask questions of, we'll ask the officer about this. Can I just ask a question, which is, just to really understand what your main concern here is, you live at the ground floor level.
Yes.
You don't have
Not ground floor.
lower ground floor.
Yes, at the garden. So we have it over there. We are not going to get petty with it 20 centimeters, or there is no parapet in the photograph. I don't know what's happening. I don't remember. One significant point, by being 1 meter, first of all, it looks directly into the flat above ours, and our activity is by the window. Secondly, it affects the architecture of the garden. This is the first one. There are no first floor ones. Maybe what I have confused you, and these are not flattering. One is housing association, wonderful neighbors. Okay, a bit more modest. If you look at the whole garden, all these are small. The Juliet balcony.
But these are proper balconies here, the pictures that we can see on
Which
the right hand
one?
side. Well, I mean, the ones on the right hand side are all.
No, they're smaller. You cannot stand on them.
You can stand on them.
No, you can't.
You can't?
And the rest, no, you can't. You cannot. They're quite narrow. I hadn't
But that one's
done.
got plants on it, so somebody must have gone out there to put the plant.
No,
Maybe
they
we can
opened
ask the
the
officer.
door and they put it. Councillor Siron, what I say, I'm not being
No, I'm trying to understand.
It affects, it sets precedents. What I'm saying, if you look at the next to this balcony where she wants to build, think of another balcony that had collapsed also, the Juliet balcony. Just think what will happen if there is another one, or we affect, if we are to preserve the character of the area, maybe it needs, a step back, be thought through again. It could be a balcony above the wing. It could be a different design, the specific.
Well, we have to consider what's in front of us. I guess what I'm trying to understand is your concern about the other balconies, and are you saying this one is going to be a bigger? This is a bigger. Okay, so we can ask the officer about that. So in your experience of living in this flat, you don't have balconies of this type on this particular side?
No,
okay.
None.
Well, that's helpful to know.
A previous application was put into 2021 and I understand and expired recently. What differences are there within this application from the 2021 application?
There's no difference. It's the same application.
It's the exact same application, just reapplying what was
just
previously
time.
approved.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is that because the landlord, sorry, the freeholder was issue?
That's correct. Yeah.
And what was the issue? Because there was a legal pause or?
What could be delay? Yeah.
Need to be diplomatic, but some of the directors on the freehold company objected to the application and then made it difficult to gain a license. But my client has, at her expense, hired consultants to advise them, and we reached agreement on the technical design, so there should be no impediment to the license coming out. But she cannot implement it without a plan permission, so we have to get,
because that expired
lined up,
because the previous one expired.
And how do you answer Mr. Negri's concern about these other balconies and the size of the balcony that is being applied for here? Is it going to be very much bigger than the ones that we can see in the images?
I'd say it is slightly wider than that, 1.2 meters. I'd say they look.
So it's more similar to the one that we can see here at.
There are some wider balconies, not in this shot. So I'd say they're probably about 500, 600 mil.
Okay. So we can ask the officers that.
Yeah, but
okay,
there's the balcony on the closet wing is wider than the proposed one.
But it's a ground floor.
Okay.
No,
okay.
the one
All
on the left.
Okay, any other questions, or shall we move on to officer questions? Thank you very much. So you can both return to the seats. So thank you very much. Ms. Cord, talk to us about these balconies and the size and what we can see in this visual, and how much bigger this balcony is going to be compared to what's existing.
So when we look at the rear elevations of terrace groups, we're looking to see if there's a consistent pattern as to whether we can enforce regularity of elevational treatments. And in this instance, when you look at the terrace group as a whole, there's quite a considerable degree of variation, both in terms of the provision of Juliet balconies, outriggers, the general fenestration treatment does vary, and I think members can see that here. In 2017, the inspector found that while there would be a slightly modest increase size to the balcony, she didn't consider that to be out of context. And I think when you look at the massing and the elevation of the terraces taken as a whole, proportionately, it wouldn't make a significantly harmful impact to our appreciation of the character and appearance of the conservation area. It's a relatively minor addition in the grand context of that treatment when taken as a whole. So I think there are comparatives in terms of there are existing balconies. Okay, they're not as deep, but the increase in depth isn't so significant as to make a harmful impact to that wider conservation area, or to be particularly discernible when taking the elevation of the rear building as a whole.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Any other questions?
Given that we have the approved application of 2021, and this is exactly the same application as at the time, are there any changes in the local plan that would be of concern here? I can't imagine there have been, but
I'm able to confirm.
So since the adoption of the new local plan in July of this year, obviously there is a material change there, but the policies that would be relevant in this instance pertain to the impact of the conservation area and living conditions. Those policies haven't seen substantial amendments since our 2019 local plan, which was the previous one to our now 2024. So there's no material consideration change from the way you'd make the assessment as you would have done previously in 2021.
Thank you. Councillor.
And how I'm a little bit uncomfortable of how you can use this balcony as a fire escape.
Have you looked at that? It's not. From our perspective, we're not looking at it as a means of escape. I mean, the fire escapes and fire issues of really building control legislation matters. All we need to make sure is that the applicant has considered the matters pertaining to fire safety as part of an application. In this instance, we would consider, and I'm sure building control would consider, the main exit from the building would be to street level. So that would be through the front door of the building and not from a balcony at first floor, because it would be the same issue from the window at the rear of the outrigger. There isn't access to ground floor. So what building control will be looking to establish is that the applicants would still be able to exit from street level from the front of their property. So the balcony wouldn't impede access to their front door or their ability to get to street level. So from our perspective in planning, it's not part of our consideration, and we wouldn't consider the balcony a means of fire escape. It wouldn't be necessary because there's an existing means of escape to the building, and the balcony wouldn't impede that.
Okay, I think we can probably move to a decision now. So the recommendation is to approve the application at flat C45 Albion Crescent. And this is please show. Thank you very much. So that application is approved. We will move swiftly on to 71 73 Portobello Road.
You're still with me.
Well done. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. So the application at 71 73 Portobello Road seeks permission for the amalgamation of two separate residential masonette dwellings. Associated alterations to the fenestration to the rear of the property would also occur, and the loss of an internal staircase located at ground floor would result in a modest increase in commercial floor space. The application site is located in the Ladbroke Conservation Area, and as I've said, it's formed of two mid-terrace units. As you can see here, these are the two front elevations of the two separate buildings, and the flat is contained at first and second floor. This is an image of the front elevation, and there are no proposed changes to that front elevation. So I'll draw members' attention to the floor plan here. You'll see on ground floor proposed, there is the loss of the staircase in that ground floor rear commercial unit. And then as we go up the building, you'll see where a wall is punctuated to amalgamate the two units towards the front of the property here. And as we go up to second floor, you'll see the punctuation for the amalgamation to form one residential unit in the centre of the property. And to the rear, there are associated fenestration changes, which you can see alters the design and scale of the openings to the rear of the property. The proposal would result in the loss of a residential unit for the local borough. The existing residential units meet and exceed minimum space standards and are of good living conditions, and therefore no exceptional circumstances are considered to exist to justify the loss of residential property. The recommendation is therefore to refuse in accordance with our local plan policies protecting our housing stock, and that is set out in the officer report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we have a couple of speakers here in the chat. Who's going to be speaking first, given that it's recommended refusal?
The agent.
The agent will speak on.
Yes, yeah.
In the case of the.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Booker, please come to the table. Yeah, 5 seconds because it's recommended to be refused.
So it's clips. Okay, fine.
Thank you for bearing with us. Please do introduce yourself to the committee, and you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
No, thank you. Thank you for your time. I'm Lawrence Brooker. I'm a director from Turley with the planning agents for the applicants. So thank you for your time tonight. I'm Peter and Ladbroke. They're in interest as always. I know that one of the neighbours also comments from the application, raised no objections to amalgamation, and actually welcomed the works to regulise the rear terrace as a property. So the proposal has the benefit of delivering a high quality family-sized home with an improved internal layout compared to the existing units. There's also no change in capacity, which is for 6 people as existing and proposed in total. The single bedrooms in the existing 2-bedroom units do actually represent a bit of a challenge in terms of their size and quality. And such units are often let and basically used as 1-bedroom properties as a result. As such, the proposed 3-bedroom home provides 3 genuine double bedrooms is considered to be a better arrangement of the space and deliver better quality residential accommodation. Turning briefly to the impact on housing stock as mentioned in Emma's report and presentation. In the borough, the challenge of housing delivery and need in recent years is of course recognised and should not be understated. But very positively, the new local plan does set out what will hopefully be a strong and increasing housing delivery profile in coming years. Just by way of example, 2 live applications at Kensal and Earls Court will deliver nearly 4,000 new homes together to the borough, consented, the vast majority of which will be small units. And alongside this, the local plan also notes the loss of only circa 5 homes per year since 2019 through amalgamations, making a very minor impact on housing stock. Therefore, given the proposal seeks to deliver an enhanced family-sized dwelling in the context of a positive housing delivery trajectory in coming years, we believe there's a case for the proposal to be supported. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I will invite Mr. Mishcon to come back to the table. Thank you for waiting.
Don't get rid of me.
I can't.
So I'm representing again the Lambeth Association, and I'll be very, very quick. It does seem to us that with all the hard work that's gone into producing a new local plan over years, that it's a really sacrilege to ignore a very clear policy, whether you like it or not. And there are a lot of people who may disagree with it, but it is a clear policy that amalgamations are to be resisted unless there are special circumstances. And the special circumstances set out in the very early part of the officer's report, very, very fully, contravenes policy HO 1B. These are perfectly satisfactory units. They may be slightly more difficult to let than a larger unit. I mean, that possible. But the loss of units is not something that the council wants. It's not something that the Ladbroke Association wants either. And so we would support a rejection.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions for our speakers? No questions. So please return to your seats. Comments, thoughts, questions for Ms. Score? Anyone? No.
I'll give a comment. It just occurred to me that it's unusual to create lateral conversions between buildings and not traditional. And looking at this, it's not like you're restoring an original family home. You're taking what were apartments above, flats above commercial units, which were vertical, and then changing its nature completely. So not just policy, but also the types of accommodation that we create.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would have to agree with that. Yeah. I'm not sure it's restoring anything, and I'm not sure it's not having what it's not having. So I think we can move to a vote. So the recommendation from Officer is to refuse planning permission at 71 to 73 Portobello Road. Can those in favour please show? Can those against please show? And any abstentions? 1 abstention. That's still written. So that application is refused. We're now going to move on to 14 Fawcett Street. Wesley? And the sounds back. Sounds very flimsy packet. Thank you, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for planning permission for the amalgamation of 2 residential flats to create a single 5-bedroom dwelling. The proposals do not include any external alterations. This application is also recommended for refusal as proposals would result in the loss of a residential unit, which would be contrary to policy HO1 of the local. The site is a mid-terrace property in the Bolton conservation area, located at 4 stories in height, including the lower ground floor level. The proposals relate to flat A, which is located at the lower ground floor level, and the above maisonette, which is located at the ground, first and second floor levels of the site. This slide shows a photograph of the site. This slide shows the existing and proposed lower ground floor plan that shows the proposed amalgamation and how each flat would be joined with the addition of the staircase. Flat A is situated at the lower ground floor level and measures approximately 57 square metres, so 1-bed, 2-person unit, and the above maisonette is situated at the ground, first and second floor levels and measures approximately 154 square metres, so a 3-bed, 5-person unit. This slide shows the existing and proposed ground floor plan, which shows the access into the maisonette, which then extends into the first floor and then extends into the second floor levels. Members will note that there are no further changes at either the first or second floors, and that there being no external alterations. The proposed amalgamation would result in a 5-bedroom flat that would measure approximately 211 square metres. This application is recommended for refusal as it is contrary to policy HO1 of the local plan for the reasons set out in the officer's report. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
5-bedroom flat, that's right? Yes.
Okay, so we have a couple of speakers. Mr. Sherman, Mr. Cohen. Sorry, Miss Cohen, I'm so sorry. Welcome, thank you for waiting. And please, whenever you're ready, introduce yourselves and
thank you.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much for listening to us, and thank you very much for having us here today. My name is Galit Cohen-Lizard, and together with my husband, we own the 2 flats on Process Street. Sorry, I'm a bit emotional. We purchased this house as both flat at the same time, with the aim of restoring it as a family house. We have 3 children, and we are taking care of my mother all together. Why I'm being emotional? It's simply because less than 2 years ago, when we visited first the 2 flats, I got a call from my mom saying, you need to come to visit your father. Then we got called by the doctor saying he's gonna leave us in a couple of months, which what happened. And I was showing him the flat as a family house. Basically, I was saying this is where I want my children to grow up. This is where we're gonna build our family, stay with us, and we're gonna be stronger together. And we'll come and visit us. We're making a bedroom for you downstairs. This is gonna be your place with my mom. And basically, I was giving him some hope. I remember myself being at the hospital and showing all the pictures. And he told me, and he said, don't worry about me, but look after your mother. And this is why I'm here today, because it's not just, first of all, it's only 3 bedrooms, as you mentioned upstairs, and we are already 5 in the house. So we need to make it a bit bigger for us. And second of all, the house before, long time before, used to be a family house. It used to be 2 flats all together, and for some reason it has been disconnected. And I understand it's contrary to the policy, and I totally understand that, in a way, it's completely understandable that it's against the policy. However, in this specific case, if you look at it, is you have only 1 bedroom downstairs and 3 bedroom upstairs. And there is no external work to be done, just a connection together to be able to use the space as a family house and live all together without going back outside the street. So this is where we are here.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to add as well. My name's Mark Shim. I'm the first man with a planning agent. I think just key to really sort of perhaps differentiate from the previous instance, which I took on board what you said, Councillor, about you know, the lateral flats above shops. Clearly not really appropriate for family housing on Portobello Road, and it's not about renting. And again, understand the policy, but obviously all applications must be judged on their own merits. And I think we've obviously just explained the specific personal circumstances here. And unlike that previous case, this is very much originally built as a single family dwelling. This would be restoring it to that use. And I think that's quite a sort of a key point. And obviously, again, understand the reasons for the policy and, you know, in many ways supportive of it. But I think there are circumstances where it's not necessarily appropriate. And this is not, you know, to create some mega mansion with underground parking and pool and everything else. It's what will be a relatively normal sized family home for 6 people, actually, 3 young children, her elderly mother. And I think it's quite a legitimate proposal. So I think, you know, obviously you can go against officer's recommendation and make judgments contrary to policy, and I think that's what we're sort of asking you to do and consider tonight. So
thank you very much. Thank you for both of you. Any questions? There's no objections. Councillor Ratty.
Thank you. Just to the applicant, the basement one, the 1 bed, 2 people, as well, 50 sounds, but is the access, is that directly from within the layer, or do you have to come out and
can you access to the basement unit from the street or within the building?
Within the yes.
You go in the main front door and then downstairs inside.
So there's no access directly, so you have to come out and then.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, you've got the layout.
Right now, you have to go up to come.
Yes. Yeah.
So presumably, if it was granted, then you would build something from inside. Is that?
It would be linked internally, yes. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. As you can see, there's obviously a staircase that's proposed on the proposal of ground floor plan to take you upstairs to the rest of the property.
And the question to officer, I don't think even there's no amount. I guess you could still put it through the existing.
Well, let's ask that in a minute. Are there any other questions for our speakers? Thank you. Please return to your seat.
Thank you.
I think Councillor Ratty has a question.
Yeah. Regardless of the amalgamation, you could just still put through a staircase that you could use as a joint family home.
No,
are you allowed to do that?
You need planning permission to to link the 2 properties.
Or what?
Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any comments?
I think it's contrary the previous application, because it was lateral, it was often stealing from 2 different bits and putting it into one. But this is just returning the home to its former original position.
Also more
and that's
convenient with the.
And I admire you looking after your mother. I'm a mother, his grandkids, and they better look after me, my kids.
We all hope that, don't we?
Yeah.
I have to say, I kind of agree. I think we have policies and they are important, and we need to preserve our units, and we need to make sure there's accommodation for people. But we have to listen to our residents.
Exactly,
and
we've back to that mind and heart. Remember?
Yeah,
and this is the same family ownership, with family in there now. So it's not a departure. It's not like it's taking a unit away from somebody else being used now.
Yes,
it's also a reasonable adjustment.
So I think we can probably move to a vote. So Recommendation from officers is to refuse this application. Can those in favour please show? And those against please show. So
what we need now from you is the same again. And I would say just listening to the discussion, that was really helpful. So the material considerations, because that's what we have to do, because there is a conflict of policy, you've identified to be restoring it to a family unit, and the fact as it operates now, is a single, household operating it. So I think that, the scope of material considerations is very wide, and the courts don't kind of indicate what can or cannot be a material consideration. So I don't think there's any risk to you there, concluding that is enough to just swing it that way. So I wouldn't discuss the private interests because that's a bit more tricky. But the two things you've identified about the ownership and restoring to a single family dwelling can absolutely be material. So
I would propose
by Councillor Member. Yeah.
Would you need to add any conditions?
I think for this one it would just be the plans and the time limit. I don't think we need any other conditions. So and I think Councillor Bowden was going to second if you're happy with that.
Do you want to? Yeah. Good. Okay. Okay. So the proposal is to approve the planning application at 14 Fawcett Street. And those in favour, please show. So that application is approved. Thank you. We will now move on to the last application. Which is the flats at Clarendon Walk, Talbot Walk, and Talbot Walk.
Thank you.
Good luck. Right, that's at Clarendon Walk, Talbot Walk, and Hamilton Walk. Yes, go on. Miss Weston?
It's me, apologies. Just missed
their bio presentation. You've lost it.
But don't worry, I know that.
Don't surprise me. We've been there for a while.
Right, thank you very much, members. Thank you, Chair. So the application for the flats at Clarendon Walk, Talbot Walk, Camelford Walk and Camelford Court form part of a series of proposals to transform Lancaster West Estate into a 21st century social housing estate. The aim of the proposals is to improve the carbon emissions on the site and to create a carbon neutral area by 2030 and to improve the thermal performance of the buildings for the residents in those buildings. The works pertain to Lot 2 of the Lancaster West Estate, which is formed of these 4 buildings before you, and they're primarily comprised of residential units. As you can see here, highlighted in orange, that highlights Lot 2 of the site, but the wider package of works, which include flood alleviation measures, the introduction of a district heat networking site, and other thermal improvements, focus across the rest of the estate. The proposed development to improve the thermal performance of the building pertains to a number of works, which include the introduction of external wall insulation in the form of a brick slip system, the introduction of triple glazed windows, alterations to the roof and parapet, the replacement of the external stair cores with internalised stair cores and the provision of lifts for level access, the loss of ramps across the estate, the provision of mechanical ventilation heat recovery systems, CCTV installation and the introduction of solar panels. Members will see photos across the site and across the 4 buildings here. The main change would be the introduction of the brick slip system, which would change the tone of the bricks from red to a sandy buff coloured, which you can see here. That is reflective of the local area, including the adjacent conservation area, and has formed part of a residents' co-design process. So the residents have approved the particular brick system and the tone and tonality of the bricks proposed. You can also see the number of solar panels, etc., which would further the aims of sustainability across the estate. These are some indicative images of what the estate would look like at lot 2 once proposals are implemented. You can see those internalised entrances, which would improve the environment for residents and provide level access, and indeed would improve wayfinding across the estate with the buildings clearly labelled for local residents. There are a number of benefits associated with the proposals, and the recommendation is to approve. The of the recommendation is set out as committee papers, and I would draw members' attention to the addendum report.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Mackover.
I'm usually quiet.
Yes.
External wall insulation is something I would ask. What's the material that is used?
That's the brick slip system. So it's the brick slip system is effectively the external part of that insulation. So you have
the actual insulation material?
Sits behind the.
Yeah, but what is that? What is that material? Because it could be rock wool, which is the fireproof. It could be PIR. It could be EPS, and that's.
The application has been subject to a fire statement, which has been reviewed by our fire officers who are satisfied that that material is safe for the purposes of fire safety. As to its exact makeup, I have to confess, I couldn't say.
It was just checking that it has been professionally assessed, and we're not approving something here that no one has considered in its fullness.
No, absolutely. It's been subject to a fire statement reviewed by our fire safety officers who are satisfied, and indeed will then go on for building control considerations afterwards.
So he stole one of my questions. The second one is, doesn't everything owned by the council, before we do any work, it needs to come to committee first, right?
Yes, so this is an application made by the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, which is why it's before you this evening.
Okay, so why is this, says here, it's a retrospective permission sought? It's up in the proposal. It says, it reads, installation of solar panels on the roof, bracket retrospective permission sought for this element. Why retrospective?
I understand that some of the solar panels have already been installed to, I think it's, if I flip back, you can see the ones aligning formal crescent. Some of them have already been installed. I'm afraid I can't answer as to why they have been installed, potentially without planning permission, but they are before members to consider this evening. And obviously we do consider that the solar panels would represent a benefit, but I'm afraid it would be for a different department to answer as to why those solar panels are currently installed on the roof line.
Do they need planning permission?
Yes, they did. That's why they're coming back to us.
Sometimes solar panels don't always need planning permission. There are permitted development rights associated with solar panels for flat blocks and for residential properties. So it is retrospective in terms of the fact that the solar panels are there, and there are conditions associated with permitted development rights, and I couldn't answer to you that they were in compliance with all of those conditions for solar panels, but the principle of solar panels and introduction onto buildings is supported by the General Permitted Development Order. So it might be that they wish to tie up the works neatly in one package because they're already there and that they want to gain consent. But I'm afraid I can't answer because it would be for the property team to answer the questions as to why they're already there. But it may be that they utilise permitted development rights, but I couldn't answer for certain. But in terms of the impact of the solar panels, obviously they have associated benefits in terms of energy performance across the estate, which would ultimately benefit the wider borough in trying to introduce clean energy measures, and it's supported in principle by our policies pertaining to sustainable environmental incentives.
And will solar panels, having solar panels in this particular estate, reduce the energy bill for the residents?
Well, the brick slip system and thermal improvements, including the triple glazing, certainly would. They would reduce the heat demand because there would be better insulation within the buildings. Solar panels are complicated because I believe and this is just personal knowledge, it's not my professional planning opinion, are fed into the grid. And I think there can be associated discounts, but exactly how that would work financially for residents, I'm afraid I would be not in the professional
So they don't directly heat or
They just-
generate heat, they have to go back to the grid and then come back?
It's a personal understanding this, it's not a professional one, so I have solar panels. My understanding is energy generated by solar panels is fed back into the system and you can get associated discounts from your bills, but they are fed into a wider system. So it has a national benefit, but obviously it will eventually have a individual benefit because there are discounts depending on how much energy is generated from the solar panels from the bills associated with that particular site. But that sits outside of my knowledge as a planning officer, and that has wider implications for the borough in terms of trying to increase our number of sustainable measures for energy generation. But yes, there will be savings for residents on the basis that the triple glazing and the external wall insulation will encapsulate heat better and therefore reduce their heat demand, which is just.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? So we'll move to a decision. So the recommendation is to approve this application. Can those in favour please show? Thank you very much. So that is approved. Thank you. And I think that concludes our business and the planning application committee for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And good night.
Not bad.
Oh,